show. Welcome to this show for tonight. Let us have a conversation about things that affect us. Welcome to this show. My name is Kato Mukasa, your host today. And I should say I'll be alone today because of unforeseeable challenges. My co-host Linda, who is based in South Africa, got a blackout. There is no electricity in her part of residence for the last 1 week. South Africa is in a blackout, so Linda cannot be with us. And last minute, our guest from Chicago, US, Todd, has got some hiccups, some challenges. He couldn't make it Saturday tonight, but will be with us in another weekend when we shall be able to communicate. We thought that it's important not to let you down, to go ahead with our show today, because some of you were waiting for this show, and we thought that it's important not to let you down, to continue with it regardless of the technical challenges. Tonight, we are going to have a discussion about a few things that affect us as human beings. We shall look at the progress and progress of our societies, but also we look at the role of our belief systems, and how they affect our economies, and how we can move forward regardless of our beliefs or lack of beliefs. Today, I'll be talking about the book I wrote. The book is called The God Business and the Death of Reason in Africa. And we shall be having a discussion rotating on issues that I highlight in this book, but also going deep and analyze what affects us as human beings. Tonight, I would like to share with you just a few things from my own observation, and there will be rotating around religion, around our beliefs, around our practices, and how they affect us, and how they either help us develop or affect our development. I want to look at the history of the regions we have today. And basically, I want to look at where we trace these regions, how they come to be what they are. I'll talk about Africa, where I was born, where I was raised, and where I have made great observations over the years. I want to say that Africa is predominantly a very religious continent. And we all have different belief systems. In some way or another, one way or another, we all have a background in our families as being this or that. We have non-believers, we have also believers, but also we have those who practice devil worshipping, who still believe in traditional religions, but also took on the imported religions, which are called the Abrahamic religions. Now, when you look at all these factors and you look at our countries by country, when you look at Uganda, you discover that over 80% close to 90% of people in Uganda profess to be religious, and Uganda is taken as one of the most religious countries in the world. When you look at Nigeria, it goes under the same umbrella. People are highly, highly religious. And when you look at all these other countries in Africa, they are traditionalists, they are Christians, they are Muslims, there are some Buddhists, of course, given the immigrations and all that. Of course, there are other peoples of different denominations that are in Africa. And we would expect that since we are a very, very, very God-fearing continent, we'll be doing good. We'd be doing good. We'd be having no wars. Would be very progressive. Would be very productive. Would be a continent full of love. Would be a continent full of productivity, because ideally religion tells us to do good. But when you look into the practice, vis-a-vis the theory part of it, you discover that the more religious a people claim to be in many African countries, the more corrupt the society is, the more poor people are, the more dictators, politicians we see in these societies, and the more unhappy these people are. When you look at the index that measure happiness in the world, the happiness index, if I can put it that way, you will discover that countries that are highly, very religious basically have very depressed people, very unhappy people. And on the contrary, you will discover that countries that don't even put religion and faith and beliefs on the forefront of driving their economies have happy people. You can look at your statistics and check out, especially Nordic countries, you check out countries like Iceland, countries like Norway, Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark. They are ranked among the first 10 countries that have very happy people. Yet, when you look at the composition of religious people in these countries, people who spend all their lives, all their days and nights in churches, you'll be surprised to see that basically the number of religious people in these countries is decreasing, and yet people are more productive, and yet people are more loving, yet the governments are more fair to the people. There's less corruption in these countries. And in contrast, when you look at countries that we see as being highly, highly religious, countries that promote these religions, that have even national mottos or slogans flaunting religion, you discover that these countries are so much into war, so much into poverty. Many people in these countries are basically struggling to survive. Lots of corruption in these countries, and the debt burden also increases in terms of governments taking loans and all that. All these African countries I can mention about, starting with Uganda, starting with Nigeria, and others that are highly seen as affronting God and being so religious. People always in mosques, churches, shrines, worshipping. You're going to discover that basically the more they go to seek these gods, or to pretend seeking these gods and being so holy, the more they do wrong, the more corruption we see in these countries. Uganda's motto is "For God and my country," but many of us haven't been comfortable in our countries. We have been talking about corruption, torture, imprisonment, bad governance, and all sorts of evil committed by people and a government in a country whose motto is for God and my country. When you look at countries like Nigeria, where still we see God being fronted, we see a division between the North and the South, where in the North it has been Islamized. We all know today that many people have been killed by Boko Haram in northern Nigeria, and that some Christians have been attacked and killed, including Deborah Samuels, who was killed a few months ago by Islamic extremists, simply because she dared to say, you don't need to promote Islam or Islam at school. If we have a discussion, let it be secular. So we see that the more we put religions at the forefront of our activities, the more we forgot our humanity, the more we focus on things that don't count that much, and we forget to be human beings first. So, what we have been looking at is forgetting that we are all one people, we are all good, loving people, and we can be good without God, we can be good without religions, we can do simply good without flaunting our flags of religions, of gods, and all that. Uganda, as a case study, is interesting that when a president is allocating ministerial positions after winning an election or changing a cabinet, appointing ministers, you always hear cries of people saying the Catholics haven't been given this position. The Protestants have been left out. The Muslims are supposed to get this ministerial position. And basically, there are positions we know in Uganda that have been ring fenced for certain religious groups. For example, we know that the vice president is generally picked from the Catholic community because the president claims to be a Protestant. Then we know that the Muslims also have specific positions we normally see them featured into. And there are certain commissions where we know that for many years have been headed by people from a particular sect, and they always complain if there could be any change in such an authority, agency, or ministry. So we see that we are getting divided along religious grounds, and it is detrimental for the cohesion, for the unity of our society. And the better we see this as a weapon that has been used to weaken us, as a weapon that has been used to divide us, as a weapon that has been used to blindfold us, we forget tackling the real issues that affect us. We begin fighting for things that don't matter that much. The more we lag behind as a people in Africa and as a people in the world. And it's very important that as intellectuals of today, we need to appreciate the histories of the religions we have today, the histories of our own societies, and how they had their own goals and spirituality, and how they were being affected in terms of development and politics and all that. But also we look at what happened when we took on the new religions and what changed with them. How was Africa before Christianity, for example? How was Africa before Islam? And how were these societies structured in their own beliefs. We have been made to think that there are no religions in Africa. There were no gods in Africa. That basically, when they brought Islam, or when they brought Christianity, that's when religion started. And that's totally wrong, because we appreciate the fact that there were religions in Africa. There were hundreds and hundreds of gods in Africa. And in many cases, the kings were treated as both divine and political. The king would be seen as a medium, but also as an arbiter, as a representative of a god. And people had their own ways of beliefs, but these belief systems did not separate people from one another, did not create hatred. You would be whatever you wanted to be, you would worship whatever you wanted to worship, but remain friendly with your neighbor, did not break families apart, because people simply knew their gods as gods for a purpose, as gods for productivity, as gods that could take them forward. So when we look at the book, The God Business, thank you, Dennis, for putting it on the screenshot, and the death of reason in Africa, we look at things that have changed and how our mindsets have been affected by religion. We ask ourselves, where could we be if we loved one another without seeing each other in terms of your religion, in terms of your belief? Where could we be if we treated each other as human beings, not as Catholics, not as Protestants, not as Muslims? Where could we be if we worked in harmony, without discrimination, without fronting our beliefs, without killing each other, without hating each other because we belong to different denominations? We need to trace the origins of these religions and also know that they were brought to us for a purpose. They are brought to us for a purpose. And that there is no monopoly of knowing, of righteousness when it comes to religion. Because all these gods they have brought, all these gods that we worship today, we fight over today, are not new. They have been there. They have been part of societies. But today, we see that they have been weaponized, they have been politicized, they have been commercialized, that we can't do much without getting divided alongside religious divisions. I'm going to look through the book, and I'm going to take you through one chapter, which I give you a history of some of these religions and how they have affected our development as a people in Africa, and what we need to do to wake up and do good and move forward. Chapter 16 of the book you see on the screen, Dennis, you can put back the title, talks about a few things that I wanted to share with you. And I say in that chapter 16 of the book, I title it as Religion as a tool for mental slavery. And I say that the sun may appear to be the same size with the moon when looked at from the earth sky, but the sun is 400 times bigger than the moon and 400 times further away from the sun. These are scientific phenomena and can't be merely explained by having faith and divine interventions. Religion gives you wishful thinking that God did it all and will never give you the ability to explain how he did it all. That's the quotation I use to open that chapter. If therefore anything that has, if there is anything that has wrecked human relations in the world today, it's religion. You can ably enter into people's psyche through religion. You can easily make people turn against each other, divide a would-be united people, make a brother kill another brother. Countries go to war, societies get divided, and everyone will be doing harm in the name of preserving their faith and being proud, causing havoc. I was citing the example of religious wars in Uganda. For the first time, when the missionaries came to Uganda, or Buganda, because there was no Uganda until 1962. For the first time, when the Christians, missionaries, brought their religions in Uganda, we saw religious wars in Uganda. We saw brothers killing brothers over a religion that had been forced onto them. So here I'm talking about brother killing a brother because they have been told that this one's version of religion is satanic and this one's version of religion is the best. Indeed, it takes religion for good people to turn into murderers, terrorists, racists, homophobic, arrogant, myopic, and damn us, despite the level of education they have attained. Now, here I'll make a point to say that if you want to see a professor getting it wrong, if you want to see a well-educated person getting it wrong, give them religion. Make them get intoxicated, and you'll see the worst part of them. You'll see people who cannot reason. We've been talking about homophobia in Africa. I've been part of the crusade that campaigns against hate of people because of their nature, because of the way they love, because of the way they associate with others. And the homophobes in many parts of Africa don't get it, that actually people can be people. And we don't need to hate them because of the way they love each other, because of the way they relate with one another, because of the way they want to associate with one another. But you see people hating each other because a religious verse has told them to hate such people. And they won't go ahead to ask questions, to dig scientific facts about the things they've been told to hate. Religion shapes a people's culture, politics, and economy. Religion defines a country's laws, healthcare systems. It determines if a country will have a sound welfare system or not, will maintain breast milk laws or not, or will get involved in specific conflicts or not. We have seen conflicts that are engineered by religion. We have known the US going to wars because it had a leadership that thought that their goal has been provoked. We know that wars in the Middle East, apart from being economic wars, there have been partly religious wars. And we know that many wars fought in Africa today are partly engineered by religion, but also partly engineered by economic concerns. People fight each other because they believe that these worship a different God and therefore need to be exterminated. So when you look at these factors that affect us, we ask ourselves the question, is it worth it? And how do we go back on the right path? And we say in this book that religion generally defines a people's short-term and long-term actions, and it is responsible for the general welfare of the people within a given country. And that's true. And as I said, that when you look at societies where people relatively more happier. You'll find that people haven't been derailed so much by focusing on what book XYZ says. People are focusing on what good people, good leaders are focusing on what makes people happy, how to improve on people's lives, not what the Quran says, not what the Bible says, not what the Torah says. But they ask a question, what do people want? Because in a sane government that is secular, that promotes the welfare of the people, people come first, not God. But the reverse is true for many countries in Africa, where often God comes first, and the result is war, the result is corruption, and the result is poverty and want. Very often, I have asked these questions. Are there moments when we shut down our reasoning and instead trust or rather have faith in stuff we can't verify? Are there those moments when things we cannot prove, we use gods to justify them? Because when you look at how gods are being used today in many societies, even beyond Africa, when something is very hard to explain, people are going to promote an ideology, are going to promote a thinking that it's God who did it. When people cannot explain how people work biologically, how things happen in terms of physics and chemistry, once they're ignorant of the obvious science they don't know yet, they always find a backup, and that backup is into religions and gods. So it has been long argued by philosophers that religion is political, and I've been saying that, and I do say that in this very book I'm reading right now. I'm reading chapter 16. It has been long argued by philosophers that religion is political, social, and economic tool used to control humanity. And that's true. The argument I make in this book, and the argument we have been making over the years, is that religion is a political tool. When the missionaries came bringing religion in Africa, they never came alone. They came with the colonists, they came with the imperialists. When we are reading our history back in the history class, we used to say that the flag followed the cross, because whenever the cross was planted, that's the church put, then there was a protectorate, then there was an area occupied by the colonizer. So religion and the gods have been used for hundreds of years as political tools. So religion is a political tool. And if you want to rule people, if you want to control people's mindset, give them a God. Make them fear something they don't see, so that you can be able to do whatever you want. And this is what is happening in many countries today, worldwide, that a bad leader is going to pretend to be the most godly, is going to justify murder, is going to justify war, saying we are doing it for God. Yet, as politicians, are doing it for themselves. But a people obsessed with God are not going to be able to ask questions, because they know you don't question God's will. Many people are indoctrinated into religion at birth, and they spend their entire life depending on religions which were forced onto them consciously, unconsciously, deliberately by a people who raised them up. And that's the point I make in this book, chapter 16, page 115, where I am right now, that all of us, in one way or another, were indoctrinated into beliefs. No one is born a Catholic, no one is born a Muslim, no one is born a Jehovah. We are all born without any attachment. And these external attachments are given to us by our parents that raise us, by the schools where you go to, by the community we belong to. So if I was born in China or Japan or India, there is a high possibility that I would be a Buddhist or a Hindu. Because in these societies, these are the gods they follow. If I was born in Russia, there is a high possibility that I will be Orthodox, because the setting in Russia is highly that. If I was born in Jerusalem, Israel, there is a high possibility that I will be a Jew. I will be into Judaism. So the same applies if I was born in Saudi Arabia. It is most likely that I'll be a Muslim, because your geography determines your religious background. Now, if you want to appreciate how religion is political, how religion is societal setting, how religion is economics, as I'm going to be talking about that shortly, look at the background of the religion you say is yours. If you claim to be a Christian in Africa, I have to remind you that Christianity is not part of you. Islam is not part of you. It hasn't been part of your history. It has been brought and taught to you, taught to your grandparents. Today, we are going to host our comrade in the US, Todd Mayer, and we are going to talk about the history of religion in the US. You would have seen how religion was used on the plantations to keep slaves submissive, how they were taught one thing that could benefit the plantation owners, to be submissive, because God wanted them that way. We would see the politics of religion on the plantations and how it affected slaves in the US, and how today many African Americans are Christians without realizing that the Christianity they follow was basically forced onto them to make them be what their owners wanted them to be. So the background in which you are raised, the systems that are attached to that background defines how you live your life, whether you're going to live it free as a free thinker, as a secular, independent person, or whether you're going to spend your lives as a slave, worshipping things you have no idea about. So the point we are making here in this book is that religion is a tool for control of humanity. And we are saying that many people are indoctrinated into religion at birth, consciously and deliberately. They are raised to think that whatever they were told is the ultimate truth. Many people will talk about other conspiracy theories, but will not see religion as a conspiracy. And that has been part of the point I've made, that religion itself is more of a conspiracy. How do you keep people in line? How do you keep people submissive? How do you keep people in a group think the same way, program in the same way? Don't ask questions, follow your directives. Make sure that they work towards what you want to achieve as a politician, as a plantation owner, as a business owner. You program them, you control them, and to what end? So that's how we look at religion. And we look at it as a tool used to control the human race. When I talk about religion, I include the African traditional religions. And that is very important to note, that African traditional religions are part of these religions that our ancestors also worshipped their own versions of religions. And these religions were also used as a tool for mass control. People are told to go and face a certain mountain or go by a certain river and worship and call upon spirits and ancestors that they are going to help them. And the rulers of the day tells them that the spirits have gotten onto the rulers. They have been chosen by the spirits to rule over them. So we don't stop at the imported religions. We also look at the African traditional religions. They are not good at all. They remain the same tools of total control. And as I said, teachers, priests, imams, rabbis, and all those authoritative people usher us into religions that basically keep us into captivity, into slavery, into total control. And what is worse is that you lose the control of your own destiny, of your own lives. In this book, I go ahead to say, in chapter 16, page 115, I do write thus, that I do not have any slightest wish to condemn believers. And that's true. I do not condemn believers, but rather the religions, the religious institutions that have promoted these religions through massive indoctrination, which has created a mind prison for literally billions of people over the last 2,000 years. So we don't condemn believers. They are our mothers, they are our fathers, they are our brothers and sisters. But we look at the consequences of the region itself and see how it has affected us, and we say this is not good for us. The world has over 4,200 known religions. 4,200 known religions today. But what is mainly known are Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, and Islam, which of course came from the same region of the Middle East or near Far East, Near East, from perhaps 7,000 years ago. Now, these religions, regardless of who invented them, are clearly designed to imprison the mind and engulf the emotions with fear and guilt. You fear going to hell, you want to go to heaven, so you must keep worshiping a certain deity for your own prosperity, but also posterity. Because the niche has been, you don't do this, you are going to hell. So they create a hell for you. They create a sense of fear that keeps you in constant fear. That you fear that when you die, people are always going to ask you, where are you going to go when you die? Because they have been fed into thinking that there is an afterlife, that a big God who looks over them is going to punish them when they are dead. And basically, science has proven that as a reality. When you are dead, you are dead. But people have been made to think that they are going to live when they are dead. They are going to burn in a certain hell when they are dead. So you live in fear the entire life. And my point, I must point out that religion is the greatest scam. Billions upon billions have fallen for over thousands of years and will continue falling for the next 1 century or so if we don't awaken up our people, if we don't see them for what they are. Now, from the African perspective, we can say that Africans worshipped their own religions, as I've said, and they did believe in the sun. All of us appreciate the sun. All of us know how beautiful the sun is and how it helps us to stay alive. So, as we see it in the spiritual setting of the Africans, we see the belief in deities that included the earth, water, and the sun. What is unique in all other religions is their worship of the sun. All religions, when you look at them, they are worshiping the sun. They are promoting the sun worship. Even when Islam talks about the moon, still it goes back to the sun. So this may sound news to many young readers and viewers today, but Christianity and Islam, just like many other religions, are religions of sun worshippers. Sun worshippers. And yet, people in Africa, as I've been stressing it, they are also sun worshippers. People who worship the sun. Why? The sun is very important, central in our lives. But should we worship it today as our ancestors worshipped it thousands of years ago? Hell no. We need to know its use, to know how it came into existence, and stop it at that. We cannot continue worshipping the sun. But of course, today, religions like Christianity and Islam still worship the sun. All ancient religions, going back to Egyptians, Phoenicians, and Babylonians, and beyond, worshipped the sun because they understood its true power as an amazing generator of electromagnetic energy, which is affecting our lives and behavior every second of every day. And as written earlier in this book, the Africans believed that the melanin in them worked in harmony with the sun. So the point I'm making then, which you may highlight, is that religions promote sun worshipping. Religions promote the worshipping of the sun. So the sun is so important to human life that without it, we would all be in trouble. Scientifically, that's true. Cancel the sun out, and we're in trouble. So the sun is the solar system, and when it changes, we change as it determines our daily livelihood, and this was very important in the agrarian revolution. That revolution of agriculture appreciated the sun very much because the sun determined the well-being of the people. So people looked up to the sun, and the sun was believed to be in the skies. So people simply worshiped the sun and made all sorts of sacrifices, including human sacrifices in honor of the sun. So we are looking at religion and the history of religion as the promoter, religions promoting the sun worship. And now, once the sun was fronted, as people sacrificed to the sun, they even went ahead and sacrificed human beings to the sun. Now, all ancient people worshipped the sun because apart from giving them heat needed for daily survival, it ensured that it supported their crops, assuring them of an abundant harvest. Exactly true. The sun gave people life. The sun ensured that people have an abundant harvest, better crops. Because if it rains and rains without stopping, without the sun coming into play, you're going to have trouble. So ancient people were well knowledgeable and knew their farming seasons well. For example, the ancients took their cycle of the zodiac and inserted the cross to mark the 4 seasons. Do not think that the calendar has begun today. The ancient people took the circle of the zodiac and inserted the cross to mark the 4 seasons. They had 4 seasons. They placed the sun at the center of the cross. So the cross did not start with the Christians today. The cross has been there in ancient Africa. And as I explain it here, the 4 seasons separated by the cross to separate the 4 seasons and the sun coming into play when you look at the history we read from Kemet. So the sun was too crucial in the lives of the ancients that they worshipped it and looked upon it for providence. The birth date of the sun was put on December 25th, and they worshipped the birthday of the sun as a pagan festival. And when the Christians took over the date as the birthday of their God, Jesus Christ. Until when? So you can imagine that the date, 25th December, was a date to worship the sun. When you look at ancient history, the seasons are divided into 4, a cross put in the center of the seasons, and the date to celebrate the Sunday is the 25th of December as the birthday of the sun. And this was a pagan celebration. But today, Christians have been told that it's the same date on which their Savior was born. And they are willing to separate from their loved ones, to hate the others because they don't follow their Savior. Now, all festival days of Christians are based on these ancient pagan traditions. Let us consider Easter as an example. About 25th March, the sun enters astrological sign of Aries, the lamb. And this time, the ancient people used to sacrifice lambs because they believed this would appease the gods. The lambs would appease the gods, most notably the sun god, to ensure abundant harvests. The ancients worshipped so many other gods, such as the moon god, mountains, rivers, but they specifically had belief that when blood was powered, human blood specifically, or the blood of the lamb, all their sins would be forgiven and they would have bumper harvests. Those are ancient people in Africa. Those are ancient people in many parts of the world. They are worshiping the sun before your Christianity was invented, which I'll talk about in another episode. They're already worshiping the sun because they know the sun plays a pivotal role in their survival. And to appease the sun, they offer sacrifices. The lamb, the harvests they have made, and sometimes they could go to the extreme of sacrificing human beings to appease the sun. So, I go ahead to say in this book that Christianity is a manufactured lie from the pagan traditions. When you look at your history, ask yourself, before the coming of the Christians and their Christianity, the Muslims and their Islam, about 200 years ago, where were people worshipping? What were they worshipping? What were they doing? They had their own sun worship. They had their own deities. They had their own sacrifices. And then you bring in an improved version of what they were having and tell them this is better and what I've been doing is wrong. So this is the programming we talk about when human beings are programmed as short circuit a change into thinking and programmed to think into a different direction to benefit those who ruled them over. Christianity, as such, is a corrupted version of the pagan traditions. There are several accounts which correspond to the story of Jesus long before he was invaded by the Romans and their allies. And as I say in this book, that Jesus Christ's story is an invention. The Romans wake up and invent something. They can sell to the Jews first so that they can rule them over. And then they find it very appealing. So they want to go ahead and take over the world, conquer more territories, and they front a religion they have created. And that's history well written. So the Babylonians tell a story of Tammuz. I want to give you a brief history how other cultures, other civilizations had their own versions of God even before we see Jesus in play. The Babylonians tell the story of Tammuz, the son of Queen Semiramis, who they say was crucified with a lamb at his feet and placed in a cave. So when you Google simply and read about the Babylonians, you are more likely to get to know the story of Tammuz, the son of Queen Semiramis. And when you look at that story, as I documented in this book, you are going to be surprised to find that what Jesus Christ said to have done was actually done by Tammuz. And Tammuz lived 1,000 and more years before Christ. So, however, when you go back and look at the Babylonians, their story of Tammuz, they are saying that there was a rock where he was placed when he was killed, and after 3 days later, his body disappeared. And in ancient Babylonian, crucifixion was a capital punishment. And later, several people were crucified for disobeying the orders of the leaders of the day. Equally, when you look at the story of Jesus, it also resembles the Eastern savior god known as Vishnu. The Eastern savior god known as Vishnu, who was there 1,200 years, 1,200 years before Jesus' story was invented. Now, who is Vishnu? The Indians will tell you more about this god. Now, because our people do not read these histories, because our people do not know these facts, they don't seem to add up the pieces and know that there's nothing special about the new gods. That actually the new gods had existed long before the old gods were into play long before the new gods. Look at the example, for example, of Kadamas of Greece, Bedr of Japan. All these are gods you can look up or you can read in this book, which I've summarized for you and showing you when they existed and how they have the same qualities as that of Jesus Christ. Krishna of the Hindustan, Samunkadan of Siam, Zamolis of Thrace, Hil and Theta of Manietis, Gentaut, Osiris, and Horus of Egypt, Devatat and Elisdes of Thebes, and Muhammad or Muhammad of Arabia. These gods have almost the same history. But then there is Buddha of Sakya of India. There is Vitoba of Benignus. There is Salvana of Bermuda, Zoroaster of Persia, Crete of Clada, Odin of Scandinavia, Hesas of Eros of Baal, Baal and Tamut of Phoenicia, So these are all gods. There are so many gods, whether in Nepal, Syria, Babylon, Greece, all these gods, very many gods I do mention in this book. And one is what is so unique that many of these gods had the same story: born by a virgin, performed some miracles, had battles with the ruling regime, and then somehow were crucified, and then miraculously resurrected. So if you have a history of gods happening, including in Kemetic Africa, Horus and others who have similar histories with the gods that are being fronted today, why don't you pause a bit and ask yourself a question: how come that we didn't know about these other gods? How come that this history of the gods that existed before is not talked about? What was the agenda of those who sold us the gods that we fight for today? And what was the purpose of selling us these gods? If you talk about Mithra, for example, who was crucified and who is believed to have risen from the dead on March 25th, a day basically for Easter. Mithra was a god. Buddha, Krishna, Nimrod, Omzu, Osiris, Akasas, Horus, and all those gods I've been naming, written in this book, did exist well before the gods we are fighting for today, the gods we kill each other over, were invented. So there's nothing special in honoring Christianity, honoring Jesus Christ. There's nothing special in honoring Muhammad, because actually Muhammad and their religions looked at what existed, looked at Christianity, looked at Judaism to forge their own kind of belief system, which is highly rooted in Arabic culture. And as I said, these are all Abrahamic gods because they come from the same stem. Abraham, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam come from the same tree. And as I've been saying in this chapter 16, which I'm now winding up, is that the essence of all these religions, the essence of all these preachings is mind control. Mind control. Whether Islam, whether Judaism, whether Christianity, the catchword is mind control. I think Genesis should capture that. Religion serves one purpose: mind control. So, as soon as we wake up as a people in Africa, as a people in the most disadvantaged continent today, where we kill each other because of differences in religion, where we don't allow people to marry from certain families because they define religion, where we deny others opportunities, jobs, scholarships, promotions because they don't belong to our religions, where certain schools today will tell you your child must belong to this religion or must accept to profess this religion to be admitted in this school. If you still fight over religion, over belief systems that we don't have any attachment, that we cannot identify with, that simply divide us, we are going to remain a continent in turmoil. The world is moving on. As I said in the introduction, when you look at countries that are peaceful, countries that are prosperous, countries that are having lower poverty rates, many of these countries are becoming secular. Even a country like UK, a kingdom like United Kingdom, where they were highly religious yesterday, they are becoming less and less religious. And countries such as the US, where we still have fundamentalists, we see how religion is dividing communities. We see how many people are pushed into poverty because they don't do things the way they should be doing them. Politicians don't pass the best laws that may help the country move forward because they don't want to antagonize what the Word of God says. I've given examples of countries like Iceland, Finland, Sweden, and others, where people are becoming more secular and more governments are getting more secular. And there is fairness because there is equal treatment of all people, regardless of how they believe, regardless of who they are. People are seen people. We always say we are good without God, and we all have the potential to be good without God. So, as I conclude today's book review, I only looked at one chapter, began with chapter 16, to simply look at religion and a brief history, but also amalgamate it with its impact on Africa. I would encourage you to get a copy of the book being displayed on the screen and get to know how the region has been a death trap. Basically, the death of reason in Africa, how it has been used as a mind control tool where people are not productive. Today, many people in Africa go to church and stay there for a day without being productive. People go to church and they have what they call overnights. So someone is staying in church the whole day to pray to a God to bless them, become rich. Another person is going to stay an overnight in a church. So when are people going to concentrate and work? When are people going to concentrate and reason on things that take them forward? When they are busy expecting miracles, when they are busy expecting providence, when they are busy expecting things to come magically. Yet the world practically does not work like that. People must think strategies, solutions to their own problems. So, Comrade Dennis, let us go back to the main screen and we wind up. Thank you very much. Today, I thought that having missed my colleagues who are supposed to be on set today, who got last minute challenges, I thought that I don't need to leave the audience unattended to. We need to talk about a few things that are important. I would invite you to send your comments about what I have shared today, and these comments will be replied going forward. And I'd like to encourage you to dig deeper into the history of religions, dig deeper into the effects of our belief systems, look deeper into the correlation between religion, politics, and economics, and then you appreciate more the need to think more independently, the need to think more critically, the need to take more time to analyze whatever has been fed into our brains, into our mind, so that you can be able to ask the most important questions. Is it necessary to spend a lifetime following certain gods, behaving in particular ways, avoiding doing specific things? Is it important? to hate people because of the way they love others? Is it important to avoid marrying from a family because they are Muslims or because they are Christians? Is it logical to kill another human being because he's a Christian, because he's a Muslim, because he's a Buddhist? Is it logical to fight wars based on religious motivations because God desires it that way? So these are important questions we need to start asking today. Questions like, does it make sense for you to get your money and donate it to a pastor to build a church instead of building a school or hospital? Does it help your society to put so much into projects that don't benefit society to move forward when there is unemployment, when there is poverty, when there is sickness? What should be the role of the church today? What should be the role of religious institutions today? They are not bad per se, but how best can we put them to use to help people advance, to help people work in harmony, to help people get out of poverty? These are issues that I invite you to think about, especially by looking into the histories of these religions, into how these religions impact our daily lives, how these religions and belief systems affect our mindset, and how they can be a source of harm or a source of goodness if we use them in the right direction. We're talking about thinking secularism, being more open-minded, being more willing to learn new things, but also to learn and unlearn as we move forward. So I want to invite you to look out for this book, The God Business and the Death of Reason in Africa, to read more about the issues that I did focus on in the book, but also promise that we shall continue with these book reviews going forward. Hopefully, we shall be able to have our friends joining us in the next talk shows going forward. I wish you the best. Thank you for joining us tonight. Be better, think better, be positive, and stay well. Bye-bye.